Hello and welcome back to the Private Client Podcast. My name is Charlie Chami. I'm an independent financial advisor and director at Glines IFA and co-founder of the Private Client Network. We're a networking group for private client professionals trying to close the gap between our various professions in order to increase our collective knowledge, improve the service to our clients, and grow our respective businesses. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking to Scott Clay, director of Together Premier. Scott spent 2 decades working in various sales and financial services companies. He founded his own financial advisory firm and has an MBA from Manchester Business School. Scott, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for the invite. Great to be here.
So we were chatting just before I hit record, and very randomly, me and you, we graduated in the same year, and we also went through the same recruitment agency to get our very first job in the big wide world. A company called Pareto Law, which happened to be a sales-focused recruitment agency or grad recruitment agency. Not that I knew that when I applied to them. I'm not sure you did either. And we, similar start, before either of us were in financial services, our first jobs were for tech firms. And the firm that I was working for, a company called Citrix, was an American firm. And there was loads of good things about working for an American firm, apart from working with Americans, which is always quite fun and interesting. But one thing that was culturally really apparent in that firm is they made a very big deal of the cultural difference in how sales is regarded in the US versus the UK. And a lot of the guys there said, in the US, sales is an extremely respected area to work in. It's an extremely respected profession. And if you're good at it, it's like quite a prestigious thing to have or to do in the US. And they commented that it's not always viewed quite the same way in the UK. Is that something you'd agree with?
I think it is something I agree with. Yeah, culturally, I think we do have a problem with sales in the UK, historically, certainly. And I've never got it. I've never understood it. And that's not the first time I've heard it, actually. I remember having a conversation a couple of decades ago, I think when I was working at AppSense, about the very same thing. Whereas, yeah, in America, they have a very different approach to it. Here, it's almost a little bit, I know we use the word seedy, but you get connotations of double glazing salesman, used car salesman.
It is that, and that's the example they'd give. Like this, what's the first thing that comes to mind in the UK? I think it is that it's like a cold calling, sort of, I guess, lower end of the market thing. Whereas it's just not the same in the US. If you say sales in the US, they tend to think large corporate contracts, doing deals, doing business essentially. And I hope it's changed. I hope it's changing, but I'm not entirely convinced it's all the way. It's kind of all the way there, although I think it should be. And a lot of the people to this podcast, they're, professional people, solicitors, financial advisors, tax advisors, that type of thing. But I do think one skill that sets all of those groups apart are the people that are better and more comfortable with the sales element of the role. Any tips? What do you think makes someone better or not at sales?
Yeah, I think if you start with what you're trying to achieve is, I never think that I'm trying to sell something to somebody. I think I'm trying to help someone with a problem. That's always been my sort of starting point. And I think that's why in the industry I'm in now, in financial services, it's not uncommon for someone to want to send you a bottle of wine or some flowers or something like that to thank you for your work. They don't feel like they've been sold something or I've ended up with a product here. They thank us for the work that we do, and I would apply that to every bit of my career. Looking back, that's always been my rationale. Whenever I made that cold call or went into those first few meetings early in my career, I was going in thinking, how can I help here? How can I add value here? How can I help this client solve this issue? And I think if you start with that mindset, I think you usually will probably end up delivering some good customer outcomes. I think going back to what you just said is that the worst thing I've seen in sales is someone trying to sell to someone who doesn't want to buy. And that's where I think those negative connotations come from. There's nothing worse than trying to sell to someone who has no need or want for your service or product. The qualification bit, it's the speaking to the right people at the right time who you can add value. Then it doesn't feel like you're selling to them and they don't feel like they're being sold to. And I think if you get yourself in that arena and at the right time, and obviously sales has changed massively since we obviously graduated and started our careers now, it was probably more common to cold call then. We've got technology now, and the dynamic and the environment is also very different as well.
You're 100% right, and I think it is that mental shift of like it's not about getting someone to buy something they don't want. And the way it was explained to me is like sales means articulating a value proposition as clearly and as concisely as you can do it. That's all. That's all it is conveying that message of what your firm can do and offer. And if people don't want it, that's cool. There'll be someone
Yeah,
else who does and or needs it. And
exactly that, and that's what we've done very successfully together. We have designed a number of different channels that talk to different clients in different segments. Ultimately, the product is the same. It's a financial services product. It's a loan, it's a mortgage, it's a bridge or whatever.
yeah,
But the clients that we talk to and how we proposition what we offer is tailored to that audience. So whether it's someone in an auction who's just bought a property and has 28 days to complete on that purchase and needs to move quickly, to the people that I deal with, which might be larger, more complex situations, we tailor that approach. So again, we're talking to the right customer at the right time about the right product.
so who are, as we're talking about together, let's start there. So who are primarily your clients?
Yeah, so Together Premier is our offering for high net worth individuals. Typically, these are business owners with complex financial arrangements, um, business owners, entrepreneurs, executive founder, people who are usually financially sophisticated, will have good advisors around them, good tax advisors as well, but won't always be able to borrow money, a mortgage, a loan from a high street bank or even a private bank quite as easily as you might think. And typically, they come to us in time-sensitive transactions as well, where they may have secured a property, possibly at an auction, but more likely off market, or they've agreed a very attractive price, but committed to a very short time scale to complete, and they need to move quickly. Those are typically the clients that we help at Together Premier through large mortgages or large bridging loans.
What's large?
I would say anything from 1 million to about 3 million is probably our sweet spot.
Yeah.
We lend predominantly in the Northwest, Cheshire, key wealth locations around the UK, London, Cheshire, and a few other areas. So you can probably work out from typical house prices in those areas, sort of what sort of size mortgages and bridging loans we might do.
So you guys, you're not broking, you're actually doing the lending yourselves.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we're a lender. So we've been around for 50 years.
Mm.
And we are the UK's largest non-bank lender. So the only difference between us and the big banks is we don't have a banking license. But other than that, we are a bank to all intents and purposes. We're obviously FCA regulated and are structured and have all the various risks and controls and treasury functions that you might expect. But we are the lender, and we're one of the few lenders, and possibly the only lender, that does have a high net worth offering, a specialist lender that offers a high net worth offering directly to high net worth clients.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So do you get referrals from financial advisors, tax advisors, that type of thing, where maybe their client can't secure funding through a more, I guess, traditional route?
Exactly that. Yeah, I would say the vast majority of the clients that come to me are via accountants, a solicitor, IFA, financial advisor, and dare I say, actually some other private banks as well, who have clients who we just can't help in the time frame or with the complexity.
Yeah, it must be a challenge. It's interesting. So one thing I've always noticed over the years, when it comes to property transactions, particularly if it's people's homes, there is a certain urgency and pressure that you don't always get with pensions, for example. Often when someone comes to us, I need to sort out my pensions is usually the phrase. There's a good chance they've been mulling that. They've been just thinking about that for like 2 years before they get to us. So the sense of urgency isn't always there. But occasionally they come right, they say, oh, I'm retiring in 2 months' time. So there is there. But I think in your world, there is usually a certain time, or there's a time pressure often with most transactions, probably.
Yeah, I would agree, and it's doing me no favors for the number of grey hairs I'm getting month on month, because it certainly makes the job interesting, and I jest because I absolutely love it. But yes, we work to very tight tight timescales. And yes, there is an emotional element to it, because they're buying their new home. It's where they're going to
Yeah.
raise the kids. It's where they'll have the summer barbecues and so on. And yeah, because of the type of clients we deal with, they will be entrepreneurs. So probably have got a deal on it. They've probably tried to negotiate a better price. They might have suggested that they're in a cash position when they're probably not quite as liquid as they suggested, and they need to get the money quickly. And we've done deals in typically maybe 30 days. We've done deals in a matter of days. We did, last week alone, we did a 1.8 million pound bridging loan in 8 working days from start to finish, and that was a fully regulated loan as well.
So turnaround times are good. Yeah, I can definitely see there'd be a market for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I say, like, we have quite a good relationship with a lot of the private banks, specifically the regional ones as well, because we're just a bricks and mortar lender. We can only lend on property. It's all we do.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, we're not a bank, so we don't offer savings, investments, banking, any sort of your day-to-day banking products. So there's no real conflict there. They might one of the private banks might just say, Scott, we've got this client.
Yeah.
They're asking for 2 million quid. They need it within 30 days. I'll say, yes, we can do that. Look after them, do a good job. And obviously, they may then provide a long-term mortgage in the next few months, because realistically, that's the sort of speed at which they operate, which is fine. And we're happy to be that stepping stone.
It makes, I mean, it's not surprising at all that you might get business from other private banks, because if you're not offering, because if they can't service their clients' lending needs, then their clients are basically going to be forced to engage with another bank that competes with them on general banking services. Whereas I suppose you guys can fulfill the lending requirement that the private bank can't, but you don't offer the other banking services, which means presumably you're less of a threat, I guess.
Well, exactly that, and we'd have whatever arrangements we'd have with honour, but we don't. They're not needed. Exactly that, because we don't offer those services. It's certainly maybe something on the horizon that we've looked at in the past, but certainly for today and for the near term, it's not on our agenda. So we're very happy to do that, and we do it very well. I mean, our business has been around for 50 years, and we call ourselves a 50-year-old startup, because we are still very entrepreneurial. We are still very agile. We can move very quickly. Yes, we have all the published rate cards, product cards, and so on. But for the right client, for the right situation, we can make a common sense lending decision, which, dare I say it, if you look at the market and the landscape over the last 10 years, the high street banks and some of the private banks, from what I'm hearing in the market, is they're offering more and more of an automated, telephone-based approach, where our biggest USP is you can ring a mobile phone, speak to a decision maker, get a certainty of a decision very quickly, and get the funds that you need in a very short space of time.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can speak and actually get through to someone, especially someone with a bit of influence or decision making, that's a good thing. So if you guys don't get obviously banks traditionally get their funding through deposits, or a proportion through deposits. How are you guys funded?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, we've been around for 50 years. I don't want to quote exact numbers, but for every pound we lend, X% of it is our own funds.
Yeah.
And then the rest will be institutional funds. So we use securitization models. We have a number of different funding vehicles that we can originate a loan and then put into one of our funding vehicles. We've got a very, very good treasury team, award-winning treasury team, who I think just recently, just last week, have just refinanced, I think, another 500 million facility to give us more headroom and more competitive terms. So yes, we don't have access to the same funding lines that the banks do, but we do have access to our own funds, and obviously and the money market funds as well.
Well, to be honest, even high street banks or private banks, they'll have a proportion of deposits, but it's pretty small. I think they'll use institutional funding and securitization as well. So it's probably not actually as dissimilar as you might imagine. But I've been out of the banking world for a little while, but I think that's still the case. We've gone deep on what you're doing at the moment, but normally I start with a bit about you. So just sort of as briefly, because you've done a lot of interesting things. How have you ended up where you are? Can you give us a little idea of your sort of career journey, sort of from that initial sort of graduating and heading first into tech and then into financial services? How did that go?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, yeah, I mean, if we touch briefly just back on Pareto law, I mean, I do think that was a brilliant start to my career, because same as yourself, we didn't know quite what we were going through, but they placed me with a software company, which was very successful. The founders of that business have gone on to be very successful since then. But I'd say that was my apprenticeship, because yeah, very much a sales focused business, very entrepreneurial business, and we started off on the phones and cold calling, but they hired at the same time a cohort of other Pareto graduates as well. So there was this great camaraderie combined with competitiveness and all those good things. And it was just a really good environment. It was a really good place to be. And it was sort of the building blocks of my career. And I did well there. Yeah, I got promoted. I was like in my early 20s. I was traveling all around Europe, Northern Europe, Scandinavia, Spain, Israel, running a small channel, which was very exciting for a young guy to be doing that. But I think my heart was always in financial services. It's always what I wanted to do. It's what I did while I was studying at university. And yeah, I came after about 3.5, 4 years at Absence. I came back out into financial services, ultimately started my own mortgage business. And a bit like, I think, starting your career in sales, I think, if you're in business, you've got to be in sales. Nothing happens in business until someone sells something. All those cliches about sales, but I think you understand sales, you understand business. And I'd also say, in addition to that, it's a fantastic thing for anyone to run their own business at any time in your career. I would highly recommend it. You just see the whole world through a different lens when you're running your own business. And I did that for a number of years, received obviously all the qualifications and so on, dabbled very briefly in the world of IFA and pensions investments, but that was more in response to what was going on in 2008 and the mortgage crisis and everything else that happened on that. That wasn't a fun time, but learned a lot. It was good experience to come through. And then what I did then was a sort of a sidestep, sort of post 2008, 2010. I exited the business because 2008 just obviously changed the mortgage market upside down, and nobody really knew what was going to happen after that. But I went to work in insurance and commercial insurance, because a company called Towergate, they approached me. They were the biggest insurer of mortgage brokers in the UK. And they said, wouldn't it be great to get someone who's been a mortgage broker and understands the mortgage broker market to come in and help run our book? And I did that for a number of years. So we were insuring. So basically, poacher turned gamekeeper is probably the best analogy there. So you understand the market, you understand how what brokers do and how they do it. Come and help us underwrite them and understand the risks and the exposures and the claims and things like that. So that was a fascinating few years running that. And then it was approached by some private equity chaps, venture capitalists, to basically replicate that. And we did that for 4 years. And again, that was a fantastic experience. Again, back running my own business, working for investors, which brought its own unique challenges and pressures and rewards. And then I exited that firm. Again, that firm now still exists. They're different guys. And I exited there in 2017. To join together.
So it's really good breadth of experience, and probably gives you a good handle on the market that we're in. And so it sounds like one comment there. So you were always dealing with private clients. It's always, or predominantly the end client was private individuals rather than corporates.
Yeah, a bit of a mix, because for a period of time at Towergate, we were doing financial lines for hedge funds and asset managers and so on. So I did actually have some dealings with them, actually in underwriting and insuring VC firms and hedge funds, which was quite interesting.
Yeah.
But I would say predominantly, mostly with and certainly most recently, with private individuals.
What would you if you had to give any advice to sort of people who are more junior in their career, dealing with private individuals, but with a slightly more sales hat? So let's take it as a foregone conclusion that they are well versed in their profession of choice, technically know what they need to do, but then maybe client acquisition is maybe not their strong point. Any advice for someone in that position, or how they might approach it?
Yeah, keep your promises. Just do what you say you're going to do, and don't overcomplicate things. And the one thing which is probably quite difficult to say to someone younger, would have been difficult to say to myself when I was younger, but something that I appreciate now is is just no BS. And people, I find, tend to respect you far much more if you're just straight with them. Now there's a finesse to that, obviously,
Sure.
but what I find is the more senior people I deal with, and dare I say, maybe perhaps the more wealthier people I deal with, the more successful people I deal with, they are the most down to earth people. They're the most straight talking people, and they're the
Mm,
people who have little time for BS. And if you play to that narrative, that you do what you say you're going to do, you call back when you're going to say you're going to call back, you at least manage their expectations throughout that process, whatever that process is, or sales journey, whatever it is. I would say that will probably set you up for success more than anything else.
God, it's so true. It's so true. You do find that, yeah, the higher up the seniority grades you go with your clients, there is less fluff. There is less sort of, I don't know, dancing around a topic, and they do get down to the sort of, I guess, they're just more frank with what they say. And it's actually much clearer. In some ways, it is actually easier.
Honestly, it is. It's easier. It's easier. I would say dealing with sort of people at middle management level are more difficult. Who I've sometimes been sat in meetings going, what is this about? Whereas if I
Mm,
go and sit with someone very senior, we get right down to it. We know exactly who said what the actions are, and off we go. And I've found that so much easier to do. I think most people would. But I think that does come with a confidence, and it comes with experience and so on. But for me, that would be the one sort of pearl of wisdom I'd give to my younger self would be to be more like that earlier in my career.
yeah. You you also did an MBA, and there was a number of years where I really thought about doing that. What was that like, going back sort of, I think it was maybe 10, 12 years into your career, going back and studying? What was that
Yeah,
like? Do you rate it? Do you think it was worth it?
100% worth it. Would do it again tomorrow. Wouldn't do it again tomorrow, but would make the same decision again in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Brutal in terms of time
Mm,
and effort you need to put into it. I was just starting the insurance MGA business, which I co-founded with the investors at the time of doing the MBA, at the time of having my second child, my young boy, being born, and I was just glued to my laptop during the day for work, during the evenings for the MBA, and it was the commitment is very high, but I would in a heartbeat recommend anyone to do it.
mm,
It's you come through the other side in a completely different space. I would highly recommend the university that you choose to do is crucial. Yes, there's some snobbery around which one you do it in, where they are on the league tables and things like that. There is some, I think there is some truth to that. You need to get it from the right institution, but the program that they offer now is I think it makes or breaks it for me. So I did mine at Manchester Business School, MBS, and they have satellite locations around the globe, in Dubai, in Miami, in Singapore, where you can actually do workshops out there as well.
mm.
So you do it for 2 years. You do a sort of a 3 month semester, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
where you'll do certain modules and so on, and there'll be a mixture of on-site workshops and essays at home, and maybe some group presentations and things like that. And you can actually go abroad and study in some of these, do these in some of these locations. So I did mine in Singapore, which was amazing. And I just wouldn't have got to do that if I'd not done the MBA. And I certainly wouldn't have got the network of people having not done that either.
Yeah.
And I think that's because largely you kind of stick to your own. So if you've grown up in the financial services market, or the mortgage market, or the pension sector, you probably see a lot of the same faces and BDMs at different providers and so on. And if you do this, if you do the MBA, you're sat next to a guy who works for an airline, a guy who's just traveled from India, who works for, a VC out there or something like that. You just meet this incredible mixture of people that you just never would meet otherwise. And
Yeah.
you're working with them on projects that very day. It was fascinating. I loved it.
Yeah. It sounds like a great experience. It probably brings the world a little bit closer to you as well, because of that network is different. It's if anyone ever has the opportunity to either interact cross border or work internationally, I think it's a great thing to do. briefly worked abroad when I was at the investment bank, and investment banks are quite well proliferated with an international sort of workforce. So you do, yeah, you do get that vibe, and it's good. I really like it. It makes the whole world seem a less scary, more interesting place, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't. That was a going into it. I didn't really think I would get as much value out of that element than I did, and it was just brilliant. I mean, for example, I quite like watching the Formula One, and we had to do this project, and just so happens that one of the people in our group um, what her uncle worked at Red Bull Formula One team. Like, who knew? So he volunteered to be on our project, and we interviewed him, and we went down to the factory and everything else, and so
Wow.
on, and made him part of our project. And it just, how would have that happened otherwise, and so on.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really good, and yeah, I think you touched on it then, just in terms of the sort of the business cultures as well. I didn't appreciate it fully, but you do business differently in different areas of the world, and it's beyond the scope of today's conversation. But you don't really appreciate it until you A, study it, or B, meet and interact
Yeah.
with people from different business cultures as well. I experienced it briefly at the start of my career when I was a young man running around Scandinavia, and I was in a sales role, and it was the end of the quarter, and Scott, how are we looking on those orders? And I'll ring the guys in Oslo and Stockholm and just see if we got those orders coming in for this month. And they were just like, hey, Scott, don't worry about it. Maybe we get the order, maybe we don't. No big deal. What's your plans for the weekend? I was like, no, you don't understand.
Oh,
My
that's
boss is
nice.
going nuts.
Yeah.
And it's just different. It's just different, but good.
Oh, that's yeah, that's really cool.
Mhm.
Um, when so working with other professions, so you've already said that you have like some of your introducers are part of like the private client world, so financial advisors, tax advisors, that type of thing. What's the circumstance might a financial advisor or even a solicitor or tax advisor, what's the circumstances they might have with a client where they should be thinking about a specialist lender like yourself? Like what might they encounter where they should be thinking about picking up the phone to you?
Yeah, sure thing. So, well, we start with accountants. Obviously, that they do a fantastic job of trying to help perfectly legally minimize your tax bill, but that not always conducive to applying for a mortgage, because since 2008, obviously the world changed. We have to, quite rightly, I would argue, evidence affordability and income on a mortgage, quite rightly and quite properly. But if you're trying to pay yourself as little as possible, because you're doing okay, you want to keep as much working capital in your business, you don't want to trigger into higher tax brackets or whatever, and so on, then, and you don't need to draw that income, then why would you? And it's that catch-22 situation that we come up a lot against, and a lot of people would struggle with high street banks who say, give us your last 3 months pay slips, and they'll say, well, I don't have 3 months pay slips, but I have a small salary of 12,500 over here. I
Yeah.
have some dividends over here. I've got a small portfolio of rental properties that I'd take some rental income from. My company over here, I've got a £2 million director's loan account, and I actually draw down from that because that's tax paid, right? So there's no tax on to that. That is my income. And a lot of the banks will just say, computer says no in that situation.
Yeah.
Whereas together, I can get comfortable with all of that. I can look at all of that. We have to verify it, obviously, and we probably will need to just speak to their accountant to verify that. But
Sure.
I can take salary and dividends and directors' loans and so on, and take all of that as income, as long as it's sustainable and obviously underwritten and subject to application, as you might expect. But we
Yeah.
can take that.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's interesting. And we haven't had, I don't think we've had any other specialist lenders on here, so it is interesting to get a slightly different perspective and a little bit of an insight into the sales and client relationship side of things as well. And I think the one of the things you said um, really resonates, which is about just keep your promises. I mean, how it could not be, how simple is that? Yeah, not under delivering. It sounds
yeah,
so simple, but it is worth its weight in gold. It's what I think what keeps clients happy, what makes them more likely to refer you to friends and people they care about. I think, God, it goes across a lot of business, I think.
yeah. I think so, and I think I think other than running your own business, I think it's easier to do that when you're running your own business. When I ran my own business, I could look people in the eye, shake their hand,
Yeah,
and tell them I'd do what I would do. I understand, or I sympathize if you work at a multinational bank and you submit a credit paper for a client and it vanishes for 2 weeks into the ether and then comes back. You probably
sure.
lose a lot of control over that situation. And you can only give the client so much assurance and certainty. Being a smaller business, albeit we're 800 staff and we've been around for 50 years, we're still a relatively smaller business. The fact that I can go and speak directly to the head of credit who sits, 10 yards away from my desk and get decisions like that and go straight back to a client within minutes with a provisional, yes, we can do this, let's get an application started. I think that gives me an advantage, certainly. But that is one of our USPs at Together.
That's really good to know. Scott, it's been great to have you on. I know you recently joined the membership, and it's great that you've done that. And yeah, hopefully we've got another sort of load of events coming up. So hopefully I'll be able to catch up with you at one of those.
Absolutely, yeah, it's been great, and yeah, the first few events I've been to in Manchester and London have been great, and yeah, looking forward to the ones we've got coming up over the summer.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
Have a good day.